So this is
Excellent.
Lucy Sullivan interviewing Marvin Sams on May 15th, 2013. Okay, Marvin, name where and when you received your credentials and where do you currently work?
I went to EEG Technical School in the Navy, in the United States Navy. That was at the Naval Hospital at Oakland, California. I'm now working in my own center doing the neurofeedback, and it's called the SAM Center, and that's my current situation.
What drew you to EEG and diagnostics?
I'm sorry, say it again?
What drew you to EEG and diagnostics?
Oh, what drew me to it? I see. Yeah, I call it a God thing. I was in the Navy, and I'd gone to the hospital corps school, medic, and I had somehow heard about it. I can't even tell you I heard about it, but I knew I had to go. So I was down at the XO's, the executive officer's office, demanding to go. You had to do a year of nursing before you could go to any of the technical schools, specialty schools rather, and so I kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and so finally she said, "Okay, fine, I'll put in the order, but you'll have to be here for at least another, for the full year." In 9 months, I was being transferred out to EEG school, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it's something I had to do. I didn't have a choice. I was inner-driven.
Was EEG a popular specialty when you were starting your career?
Oh, no, not at all. I think most people never heard of it. It's one of those things where, well, they hadn't heard of it. It was a new field, basically. This was, it had been out there for a while, but it was a relatively new field.
Who were your early mentors?
That's a very good question. I've done all of these questions, and I'm saying to myself, that's interesting. The person that I worked the most with in those early days is E. Daniel Nussbaum, N-U-S-B-A-U-M. He's an MD, neurologist. And we worked together in the Navy, and then we made an agreement that when he got out, he was in longer than me. When he got out, then we would work together. And so we literally learned every day. We read EEGs together. I worked with him in the neurology clinic and so forth. So really we learned together. As I was thinking about this, really my, outside of that, my real mentor were the books, Gibbs and Gibbs and volume 1 and 2, Kilo, McComas, and Osselton later, Electroencephalography by Helen Parr. I mean, this was very book-driven, and even today, I'm always got my head in the book, or I'm learning online. So, and then of course all the greats like John Knott and Chuck Henry, etc. So it brought up some interesting memories. Let's put it like that.
What were your earliest career influences?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, it's really, it was something I had to do. The influence was inner-driven. It was something that I had to learn, and the good news, I was able to. I had the resources to do that. But I guess my career influences was that, and then it just evolved. I went through several layers. As it were, each one leading to the other. I was worked, in the clinical work, and then went into research supervisor at the Mayo Clinic, academics. I was at Ohio State University Hospitals, and then clinical, and then all that led me to neurofeedback, brainwave training. But it was like a stepping stone, but each one gave me another depth of knowledge in a certain area, and then just putting all those together led me to, helped me to become involved in neurofeedback or brainwave training.
If you had not become an EEG technologist, what would you have liked to have done?
I have no idea. imagine it. Like I said, reading these questions, I'm saying, wow, that's fascinating. I don't know.
Yeah. Why do you think this field took off when and how it did?
I think that's a pretty obvious question when you look at the history. It's a dedication of a few people. The formation of ASSET, the American EEG Society first, and then ASSET. Those two professional organizations, and then the dedication of a few people. In that regard, Dorothea Brittenham and Nana Kagawa, Lila Snodgrass, etc. I mean, these people were just dedicated. And thinking back, they must have been in about the same inner drive as I had. I mean, it's just like everybody had to do it, and everybody worked together, and there was terrific harmony. It was like family. That's true enough, but in other words, there were some conflicts, but all in all, it was family. Everybody working together toward the common goal.
What kind of equipment did you train on, and what were the main limitations of it?
Well, I actually trained on the Grass Model 3. The limitations, well, you had to have an air conditioner, but we couldn't get one. So it had these big heat sinks in it, and it heated up the room. And, of course, as you very well know, that one of our biggest enemies, as it were, is sweat artifact. And so when you got a machine heating up the room and it's causing technical issues, but you got to have one, you got to have both, So that was the biggest limitation, I think. It was way too hot. It heated up the room. And it's noisy, when you turned it off. It's like silence was roaring. You didn't notice it so much, but it was a very noisy device. It had fans in it, big fans. So,
what other equipment have you used over the years, and what are the pros and cons of them?
Well, I started out with the Grass Model 3, went to Grass Model 4, Grass Model 6, Grass Model 8, and kind of interspersed in there, worked with the Offner equipment, the Elima Schonander, which was intriguing. It was a jet spray, device. You could look at high frequency stuff. It was more, in my mind, it was almost more of a novelty because the ink spraying on paper, you could barely see it. But anyway, working with those was all very interesting. And now, of course, I'm working with a quantitative EEG, and the first one there was the Lexicor, and I still use Lexicor after all these years. It's a magnificent piece of equipment.
What memories do you have of your training program?
Exuberance. Wow, this is fun. It was crazy. You put these wires on people's head, and you sit back and watch these pins write out all these squiggles. Wow, that is amazing. So you got squiggles in your head. Who knew? When I was back in those days. But that was, as they say, a pig and poke. This was exuberance. That's the right word, exuberance.
How many people were in the program with you, Marvin, in the Navy?
Wow, that's a good question. Actually, there's one other person. I hadn't thought of it. Yeah, there was one other person. There were two of us. There were two students in the class.
What are the main ways in which the field has changed over your career?
There's a very sharp dividing line, the division between clinical EEG and the work that I'm doing now, which is really just an extension of it. We've gone from clinical EEG diagnosis to a neurotherapy, and so I'm actually working with the disease processes, I guess you could put it like that I saw, and now we're actually able to fix it, as it were, to remediate it. So that's the biggest one for me personally. Within EEG is I'm observing, and that's really what I'm doing at this point. And observing, I'm seeing, doing surgery and potentials, which we did at the Mayo Clinic back in the early 70s, but it seems to have come to a new level. But I really can't speak to that. I can speak to myself, but I can't speak to the field.
How has scientific knowledge changed the field, and what do you think were the big breakthroughs?
Well, the big breakthroughs, guessing the second part first, the big breakthrough was education. When I started, we put on like 8 electrodes, as I remember, plus a ground and that sort of thing. Then it evolved to the 1020 system, which standardized it. Going to the scientific meetings, everybody had a common base, and I think that's really was actually a huge breakthrough, was having a standard that people could relate to. Everybody could sit down, doctors, technologists could sit down and actually have the ability to communicate without having to explain what they were doing at great depths like we used to have to. Everybody had a different electrode technique.
Mm-hmm.
So the scientific knowledge, again, we go back to going to the beginning again of the question. So the scientific knowledge was, for me, was going from diagnosis to treatment. So that's the exciting part, for me.
What are the 2 to 3 big issues in EEG that people are working on to solve today?
I'm not sure because I'm not in clinical EEG anymore. Excuse me. But for us in the neurotherapy field, it's learning new techniques on a continuing basis. Now we're doing Z-score training. We're taking the quantitative EEG, and we're looking at normal subjects, comparing it, and seeing deviations from normal. And so we're able to actually normalize the EEG, which directly affects the symptoms. So for us, it's really learning Z-score training and so forth. And clinical EEG, I don't know.
So what type of patients would you use the Z-score training on, Marvin?
Anybody with attention, mood, memory, trauma issues.
I think that's all fascinating.
Oh, it is. It's fabulous.
What are the main areas of professional discussion or disagreement today?
Same old. I don't know when it comes to clinical EEG. And ours, well, everybody's got their own technique, it seems. The Z-score training seems to be bringing some people together, even there there's controversy. But this is, it's kind of like EEG in those early days. Everybody had their own ideas, and everybody's pushing those ideas and so forth. So the discussion is and neurofeedback. Clinical EEG, I don't know. And neurofeedback is who's got the best technique, and the disagreement. Well, my technique's better than your technique. That sort of thing.
How is it coming along for reimbursement for neurotherapy?
Not so well, even though there's at least one of the big carriers is seriously looking at it.
Okay.
It's actually in committee, but it's not been approved yet.
What are you most proud of in your professional life?
Being able to positively affect people's lives. In the old days, in clinical, I was able to help people to understand what's been going on with them over the years. And now we change people's lives on a daily basis.
Where do you see neurodiagnostics in 10 years, or neurotherapy, we can just say?
I'm glad you changed that because I can address that. Yeah, and the neurodiagnostics, I think that we could basically in 10 years. I mean, that's really a good goal. Again, this really set me to thinking with reading these questions. In 10 years, I think we can just about wipe out learning disabilities. I think we can basically end attention issues. Mood could become no more dramatic than all of us experience from day to day. In other words, severe depression and anxieties and so forth. And I think that's a very achievable goal. And frankly, I think it'll just happen. I don't think anybody has to get out and drive it or anything. It's just going to happen. And I work with professional athletes and so forth as well. So we're talking about peak and even elite performance, both academically and athletically. So this is going to be changing the world. But again, I go back to the foundation. What's the foundation? Brainwaves, EEG. And so taking it to the next level, yeah, sure. But on the other hand, it's a neurotherapeutics that is changing the world as we speak.
What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Well, this is kind of funny, I guess, but I got it from my dad. And you have to keep in mind that my dad was in the Great Depression. And my mom was in the Great Depression. They thought that way. And he told me, Marvin, always do something that they can't just pull someone off the streets to do your job. I'm saying to myself, when I was young, I said, well, okay, fine. But now I really see that that's true. The best piece of advice, do something. Now, I didn't have a conscious thought of it. Maybe it was that seed that was planted. Perhaps, I don't know. But I had to do EEG. I had to do an evolving. I had to do neurofeedback. I mean, I didn't really have a choice. So I don't know if that was inner drive or what, but that's what my daddy taught me, and I listened. For what?
Can you talk a little bit about some of the products you developed, or how that was different maybe than a lot of people in EEG?
Yeah, well, basically, I've always been kind of, I don't know, what's next sort of person, and could this thing be better? I'm what I call a tweaker. I'm always trying to tweak it and get the next benefit from it. And of course, I invented ElectroCap, ECI
right.
ElectroCap. And it took a 20 to 30 minute process of carefully measuring and marking the head, if people even did it, measuring and marking the head, individually applying electrodes, either with paste and pasting something, gauze or tape or whatever, collodion, which was always good for your dermatitis on your hands.
Yeah.
And the acetone and the ether and the collodion stinking up the lab smell like a dental's office or something, or a surgical suite. So I invented ElectroCap. It took me 7 years of part-time and 5 years full-time to develop it to the product that it ended up being. So it was a big, huge commitment. I had no idea it was going to take that long, but it was very worthwhile. So now the ElectroCap is very well accepted internationally. I got us into Europe and to Japan when I had the company. And so it took a 20, 30-minute process down to 5, maybe 10 minutes. And that, to me, is a great breakthrough. And as the work of Benny and others has shown that it's actually more accurate than hand measuring of the head. And that, with measuring and marking it and applying the electrode, it's actually more accurate. So, for me personally, I have to say that. Because I believe it, but I think that's a big one. Of course, I was involved in ambulatory EEG for a number of years, and that never really took off to the level that I thought it should. Being able to walk around and have your brainwaves recorded while you're eating and sleeping and living your life and seeing what happens moment to moment. But to my knowledge, it's still out there, of course, but to my knowledge, it never took off like it should have. But nevertheless.
It seems like there's a big resurgence in it, actually, Marvin. There's
Oh,
more
really?
before being that. Yeah.
That's great.
No, it is. It's interesting because I'm like you. I've always thought, you do put people in these epilepsy monitoring units and nothing would happen, and then you send them home and they have a seizure. So it's like, well, maybe they need to be home. But I think it's, I'm just talking to because I work from home now too, and I'm not in clinical and haven't been for talking at meetings and with different people, and it seems to be coming back. And but they're to the point where they're. The equipment is better, too, where they can, set them loose for, 4 or 5 days at a time. They don't have to come back every day, and I think that had something to do with it, too. But it's kind of interesting.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I like that.
Is there other people you think that I should be interviewing?
You
Who
know,
do you?
that's a very good question. You know, as well. Of course, when you get my age, a lot of the people that you worked with are no longer on the planet. You know,
Yeah.
most of it's pretty well documented that they're no longer on the planet. But I don't know of anybody that you know. As far as EEG is concerned, I don't know of anyone that that came to mind.
Okay.
So.
And well, good. And Marvin, I would like to encourage you. I mean, I don't know at any time, or if I could help, or we could get somebody else involved, you know, to write an article for the journal about neurotherapy. And I know a lot of technologists have no idea about it, and I just do it away because I get an exchange of the ISNR newsletter. And it's just fascinating to read all of this, but I've never actually seen it done myself, you know, any of it. And
come to Dallas, you know, well, you can spend as long as you want here. I'll put you to work.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. It would be really interesting to see your place. But I just, you know, or if you think of anybody I could contact just to write like just a basic overview. I know it's hard to be basic with all that you guys do, but I meant just what it is and what's out there and things like that.
You know, let me prowl around a little bit. You know, the original two people, as it were, the people that really kicked this thing off. You know, I guess the primary in that regard would be Joel Lubar, who's now a professor emeritus. He was at the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, I think. But he's very, very busy, and because he's retired now, he's still doing workshops all the time, 2 or 3, 4 big workshops, you know, a year, that sort of thing. He's he's a busy guy, but you know, he might be quite willing. Now he's old school, you know, so it's kind of like Daniel Silverman asking him to write about, you know, if you remember Daniel Silverman, asking him to write about the early days of EEG. You won't get a lot of, no, it's not true. I started saying something that's not true. No, he's on top of it. So, but he would be a really good one to write something up, and he would include disease score training. You know, I'll talk to him. I'll shoot him an email or give him a shout, and I'll talk to him. I think because I always wanted to do it, but I'm so busy. I mean, we're just incredibly busy. I just hired my third therapist, so and then I'm busy doing the evaluations, all day, every day, and so I don't know that I have time. Plus, I'm not the one to talk to because I'm always innovating, and innovators like me don't sit still very long to. You
wrote great photic stimulation articles people still read all the time, though.
Yeah, you know, that was an interesting project. That's kind of an anecdotal thing. We don't have time. You know, in those days, you know, we had a typewriter. You remember typewriters?
Oh, yeah. I trained on one. I'm not that young.
So we had a typewriter. And so you know, you'd type, and then you go through, and you start off triple spacing it, and then you'd mark through it, and then you try to read what you marked through and rewrote, and then you end up double spacing it, and you end up single spacing it, you know, before you finally got to the original article. Well, what I did with that trilogy, ended up being a trilogy. They busted it up into 3 parts.
Right.
I didn't write it like that, but that's what happened. So I reviewed 80 articles from literature. Now you didn't do a Medline search in those days. You went down to the library and with a pocket full of quarters and rolls of quarters and made copies if you wanted to have some sort of permanent reference. And so I did that, and this is a side story that for me personally was very, very interesting. And so I reviewed these 80 articles, condensed them down. Well, I was living in Salt Lake City in those days. I'll never forget it. Had a pretty good sized living room. I'd take this thing and I'd cut it into pieces. And then I'd put these pieces in rows and row and row. That ended up with about 12, 15 different rows of cut up pieces of paper. And then I'd tape those to to the 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and retype. Did all this myself, right? And so I did that, and so then I worked on it. I finally got that done. Well, then it took so long. I ended up at the Mayo Clinic, and they have a section of journalism. They call it. Everything's a section there, section of electroencephalography. Whatever. So okay, fine. I was so thrilled. Oh man, I got this thing done. This is fabulous. And so we got. So I turned it in, and nothing comes out of the Mayo Clinic. Nothing comes out of the Mayo Clinic without it being reviewed in committees. Basically, you can give a talk. Okay, fine. Your section head and about the residents and the other staff physicians and so forth all got together and listened to you give a talk, and they critiqued it. This is what you can think of as slash and burn,
Yeah.
And so they sent it to the section of journalism. What I got back, is holy mackerel. This isn't what I turned in. And they had just totally rewritten the whole thing. Well, not literally, but that's my emotional reaction. I sat down and I was depressed for about 3 or 4 or 5 days. What have they done with my baby? And then the light bulb went on. These people are making me look really good. So I said, yes. So it went to the journal, got published as a trilogy. And so, is that my research? Yeah. Are those my words? Well, to a certain extent. But it was really the section of journalism that made it what it is today. So,
well, it's a classic. That's good to know, see? That's a great story.
Well, I'm like you, I'm sure. I got dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of stories, I don't know. When you get my age, you start thinking of stories. And I don't really think that much. I'm so busy in the future that I don't really think about the past and the present and the future. But when you sent these questions, that really resurrected a lot of interesting memories. It did.
I bet.
Yeah, it was fun. So, anyway.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time, because like you said, how busy you are, and this is wonderful to have this.
Well, it's not, it's just been a blessing for me. I really appreciate it, Lucy. And I hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, take care, Marvin.
Okay, you bet. It's good talking with you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.